September 20th, 1944. Arnhem, Holland. For 3 days, a British lieutenant colonel named John Frost has held a single bridge with a shrinking band of paratroopers. Around him, burning buildings, dying men, and an entire SS Panzer Corps closing in. Frost has no reinforcements. No food. Almost no ammunition. Behind him waits the rest of the Allied army, stuck 10 miles away, unable to break through. 9 days earlier, this operation was meant to end the war by Christmas. Instead, it becomes one of the most costly failures of the Second World War. Its name, Operation Market Garden. By September 1944, the war in Europe looked nearly won. Paris had fallen in August. Brussels was liberated. Hitler's armies were retreating across France and Belgium faster than anyone had predicted. Allied commanders believed Germany was close to collapse. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, commander of the 21st Army Group, pushed a bold idea: one massive strike could end the war before winter. His plan was Operation Market Garden, the largest airborne operation in history. Market, over 34,000 American, British, and Polish paratroopers dropped deep behind German lines. Garden, British XXX Corps racing up a single road to link with them. The target was a chain of bridges across the Netherlands, ending at Arnhem, gateway into Germany's industrial Ruhr region. If the plan worked, Allied tanks could be inside Germany within days. If it failed, tens of thousands of paratroopers would be stranded deep in enemy territory with no way out. Montgomery pushed the plan through in just 1 week, an extraordinarily short planning window for an operation of this size. Intelligence reports warned of German armor resting near Arnhem. Montgomery's staff dismissed them. The operation was approved for September 17, 1944. 3 separate armies would jump into the unknown on the same morning. The American 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, would seize bridges near Eindhoven. The American 82nd Airborne Division would capture the bridge at Nijmegen, spanning the Vaal River, and the British 1st Airborne Division, alongside the Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade, would take the final and most critical prize, the road bridge at Arnhem. Leading the British effort at the bridge itself was Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, a decorated veteran of the fighting in North Africa and Sicily. His orders were simple, but nearly impossible: hold the bridge for 48 hours until ground forces arrived. On the morning of September 17, 1944, over 1,500 aircraft and gliders filled the sky above the Netherlands, the largest single airborne deployment ever attempted. Dutch civilians ran into the streets, believing liberation had finally arrived after 4 years of German occupation. But 3 miles from the British drop zone, a wounded German field marshal named Walter Model was resting at a farmhouse. Nearby, hidden and resting after weeks of combat, were 2 SS Panzer divisions, the 9th and the 10th, whose presence had gone completely undetected by Allied intelligence. The drop looked flawless from the air. On the ground, it fell apart almost immediately. British radio sets, tuned to the wrong frequencies, failed within hours. The men couldn't communicate with each other, let alone with command in England. Worse, the drop zones had been placed nearly 8 miles from the Arnhem Bridge itself, a decision that would cost the British division precious hours it did not have. General Wilhelm Bittrich, commanding the 2 SS Panzer Corps, reacted with brutal speed. Within hours of the first parachutes hitting the ground, his tanks were already rolling toward British positions. Of the entire 1st Airborne Division, only 1 battalion, roughly 740 men under John Frost, fought its way through Arnhem streets to reach the bridge. The rest of the division became pinned down miles away, unable to advance. At Nijmegen, American paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne were locked in a brutal fight of their own, storming across the Vaal River in flimsy canvas boats, under direct machine gun fire to seize the bridge there. Below, on the single road nicknamed Hell's Highway, British tanks of XXX Corps advanced at a crawl, slowed by blown bridges, narrow terrain, and constant German ambushes. By nightfall on September 17th, they had covered barely 10 miles. Frost's men, dug into buildings on the northern end of the Arnhem Bridge, had no idea that the rescue force behind them was already falling dangerously behind schedule. For 4 days, John Frost's men held the northern end of Arnhem Bridge, an increasingly impossible position. German tanks rolled directly onto the bridge itself, and the lightly armed paratroopers fought them with little more than hand-held PIT anti-tank weapons. House by house, the British perimeter shrank under constant shelling. Buildings burned. Cellars filled with wounded men, and medical supplies, including morphine, ran out completely. Frost himself was wounded by shrapnel but refused to surrender his command. Miles away, the remainder of the British 1st Airborne Division found itself surrounded in the town of Oosterbeek. The Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade, delayed for days by fog over English airfields, finally jumped on September 21st, landing directly into heavy German fire, with almost no cover on the drop zone. General Stanislav Sosabowski watched helplessly as his men scattered under fire, unable to reach Frost's position at the bridge in time. By the night of September 21st, after 4 days of continuous, close-quarters combat, Frost's exhausted defenders finally ran out of ammunition. The bridge fell into German hands. Of the roughly 740 men who had reached it 4 days earlier, fewer than 150 remained standing. The rest were dead, wounded, or taken prisoner. Frost himself, badly wounded, was pulled from the rubble and captured. 10,000 British and Polish soldiers remained trapped at Oosterbeek, surrounded, running low on food and ammunition, with no certainty that help would ever reach them. In the small Dutch village of Oosterbeek, a Dutch woman named Kate ter Horst opened her home to the wounded. Her house, in the Hartenstein area, became a makeshift hospital, sheltering over 300 injured soldiers in rooms built for a single family. German shells fell around the building daily, yet she refused to leave, reading aloud from Psalm 91 to soldiers uncertain whether they would survive the night. Outside her walls, the fighting never paused. Soldiers of the 1st Airborne dug trenches into garden plots, defending a shrinking pocket of ground barely a mile wide that troops nicknamed the Cauldron. Ammunition grew so scarce that some men fixed bayonets, preparing for a final assault with cold steel alone. Dutch civilians across Oosterbeek risked their lives hiding wounded soldiers in basements and cellars, fully aware that discovery by German forces meant execution. Many of them paid for this courage with their lives. In England, radio operators kept receiving the same desperate transmission from the perimeter. Ammunition was nearly gone, and confidence that relief would arrive was fading fast. XXX Corps tanks sat less than 10 miles away, yet German artillery, destroyed bridges, and roads turned into killing grounds kept them from closing that final distance. 10,000 men remained trapped inside a pocket the size of a small town, and with every passing hour, that pocket grew smaller still. By September 25, 1944, the situation at Oosterbeek had become hopeless. General Royerkart, commanding the 1st Airborne Division, gave the order every commander dreads: withdraw. That night, Operation Berlin began. Under cover of darkness and heavy rain, the surviving paratroopers crept toward the Rhine in near total silence, boots wrapped in cloth to muffle their footsteps as they moved. Small boats ferried them across the river in groups, while German artillery searched the darkness for targets. Of the roughly 10,000 men who had jumped into Holland 9 days earlier, only around 2,400 made it back across the Rhine to Allied lines. The rest were dead, wounded, or captured. The city of Arnhem itself remained in German hands. Operation Market Garden, conceived to end the war before winter, had failed to achieve its central objective. The Allies had gained a narrow salient into the Netherlands, but the bridge too far, Arnhem, stayed firmly under German control. The war in Europe would grind on for another 8 brutal months, through the harshest winter fighting of the campaign, before Germany finally surrendered in May 1945. Operation Market Garden remains one of the boldest gambles of the Second World War, and one of its most studied failures. It exposed the danger of underestimating enemy strength, and the fragility of plans that depend on speed alone. John Frost survived German captivity and returned home after the war, forever remembered for the bridge he refused to abandon. Kate ter Horst became known across the Netherlands as the Angel of Arnhem, honored for generations for her courage inside a house full of dying men. The bridge at Arnhem, rebuilt after the war, was formally renamed in 1978. Today it carries a new name, the John Frost Bridge, a permanent marker of the men who reached for one bridge too far. The battle remains a defining case study in military planning taught at academies worldwide. 10,000 men. One bridge. 9 days that could have shortened a war, and didn't. If this story moved you, subscribe to Written in Blood, where we uncover the moments history almost forgot.